Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Somna Sambo. Nigeria's President Buhari's frequent visits for medical treatment abroad have brought intense criticism about the government's transparency over his illness and worries about leadership during some of his long absences. At the hashtag Harass Buhari out of London protests, demonstrators chanted, "Go back home, Buhari." Many carried various placards asking Buhari to return to Nigeria. Days after a pro-Buhari protest was staged and demonstrators could be seen praying for good leaders to rule the country, President Buhari's medical trip comes at a time when resident doctors in the country are on strike. Let's take a listen.
General Muhammadu Buhari is now here in London assessing his doctors. In Nigeria, he left on the day that resident doctors, began a strike. So now Nigerians don't have access to doctors, and then this man is coming to a foreign country. Why are Nigerian doctors on strike? Because they are not well paid. And how much is he? He's here paying millions of naira to his foreign doctors. Now, how can we stand for that? Think about that. As I speak to you right now in Nigeria, resident doctors are on strike. Judicial workers are on strike. The Association or Academic Staff Union of Polytechnic Workers are on strike. Just 2 days ago, some hoodlums went to Imo, the correctional center, the prisons there, attacked it, and freed 1,800 inmates. In Shiroro local government in Niger State, 100 communities, now I didn't say 10, 100 communities have been occupied by bandits. In Kaduna, Kaduna is just like the unsafest place in the world right now. 8 members of the Redeemed Christian Church of God are with their abductors, bandits. The whole country is at a standstill, it's shut down right now. And then you have this man who's left the country, and then he's here. Look, the only thing that the Buhari cabal do with Nigeria is to exploit Nigeria.
Right, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a Rise News analyst. Good to have you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at this issues. Buhari seeking medical leave abroad. A lot of Nigerians do not actually understand how the Constitution works. What the Constitution actually says is that if the president is going for more than 21 days, then he can hand over to his vice president. But out of goodwill, some people have said, since he was going away for 14 days, why not still hand over? But surprisingly, just yesterday, we saw Vice President Yemi Osinbajo performing duties that seemed like he was in charge as an acting president, though he has not been officially made an acting president. And today, we saw him actually decorating the new acting Inspector General of Police. In all of this, how do you situate it with this protest and these dissenting voices by Nigerians like Reno Omokri saying that the president has left his job and all of that and he shouldn't be in London?
Well, 3 points. The first is the constitutional issue. I mean, the president has not handed over to the vice president, no matter what he does. I mean, the vice president can do anything on behalf of the president. Even if he was here, he could as well ask Yemi Osinbajo to go to Imo State. He could ask him to decorate anybody. I mean, those are ceremonial things that people think the president ought to do, but he could actually ask the police commissioner to do that. So there's no written constitutional or basic law that says the decoration has to be done president. Again, whatever the president can do, anybody can do for the president, except the one that the law says has to be done in person. And the question around handing over power, the constitutional provision was an amendment to deal with a crisis when, of course, we know that Yar'Adua traveled and ostensibly wanted to give handover, but his people blocked it. And so the National Assembly now says, we can allow you a leeway, but once it's 21 days, 3 weeks, we shut you down. We just believe that you can no longer perform that office for that time, and that power should go to your vice. Again, should the president hand over if he's traveling 2 weeks out of the country on medical condition should suggest perhaps some degree of incapacity, temporal. I mean, if he's so sick to go on medical,
which Gorbachev said is not so sick.
So he creates a medical quandary, or a moral problem for the government. If it's routine, I mean, that lays claim to irresponsibility. in the face of what we are facing. So it's so routine that it can't be done in Nigeria. That means we've had a totally failed medical system. I can imagine the president being very ill, and perhaps based on our medical facility, we are still very low. There are certain ailments that arguably our doctors, with all their best care, may not handle because of lack of sophisticated equipment. Then you can say that the president needs to go abroad. But if he says routine, so it's a moral quandary. If it's routine,
it's routine because, like what Garba Shehu said,
yes,
he had been having this consultation with his, physicians,
yes,
even before he came into government and all
person.
of that.
So now,
but let's situate this within the context of resident doctors going on strike when he's going out of the country. That's the area that these protesters are saying that he should have handled before going.
No, but that's not. The problem is that, look, for the past 5 years, the government has failed to do anything significant to change the state of health care in Nigeria. So even if the president was holding Aso Rock, as a couple of months ago, he couldn't probably do much because the crisis is a crisis of lack of capacity. They're asking for payments, they do them. The country is seemingly broke or misprioritizing, misallocating resources. So even the Minister of Health and Minister of Productivity, Labor and Productivity, has argued, look, you guys, if you strike, we owe you more. It's really a crisis of governance and evidence of failure. So I'm sympathetic to the president going abroad for medical care because it's really basically an illusion to assume that they can fix anything. 5 years, we didn't make those investments. If you look at the figures, how much spent on State House Clinic in 3 years, every year annually, was 3 times more than spent on all the teaching hospitals in Nigeria. And so,
in all of these, some people have said that this protest by the Reno Mokri's group is not justified. And that's why you saw the president's supporters also coming out to come and pray for him at the Abuja House in London. Are these other supporters unfair to President Buhari? Would you subscribe to the fact that these pro-Buhari protesters are saying that he's the leader of our country, he decides to choose whichever hospital he wants to go to as long as he's fit and he's alive to be able to run the country?
I think they are dead wrong. First, this president is being taken care of through public funding, and they talk about Buhari has going to London as a private citizen. Nobody can argue against you, even if you like to go and remove a teeth, which is a basic thing in Honolulu or in US. We can only say, oh, that's foolish, but that's their money. So this is a president who is public fund. Second, this is a president who, the presidency is a person who epitomizes the dignity of the state. So if for mundane routine, they say, a president can leave his office for 2 weeks, the citizens have a right to say, this doesn't make sense to us. Again, if you are living for things that could be done by your doctors, if you are leaving as your citizens to deal with almost a comatose health sector, if you are President Buhari who had campaigned on the fact and who had gone to Chatham House in London to say, this is crazy, health terrorism. So the argument by Gagaba Shehu is wrong. Of course, they have a right to protest in support of the president. I mean, this is democracy. So some of those guys can go, APC members and supporters can say, look, Mr. President, we pray for you, we wish you the best, quick recovery, Nigeria will be good. That's democracy.
That's because they feel that Reno Mokri's group is sponsored. That's what they keep saying, that, I mean, he's worked for Atiku Abubakar and all of that. He's worked for the PDP, so it's more of an extension of PDP, not nationalistic.
It could be that the PDP...
So that's why the APC too and their guys have to come out to support the president.
What I'm saying that any person who sits in London and says, what's going on? They said, a Nigerian president has come to do routine medical care. I was, wow, routine? Presidents actually don't travel out of the country for Medicare, except only African countries. I mean, you saw some of them.
Does it have to do with trust? Because, I mean, maybe President Buhari doesn't trust Nigerian doctors enough with his life to be able to do some very critical medical procedures.
But you see, the thing about being president is that you have to suffer things. I'll give you an example. Clinton probably likes to have fancy haircuts. Did a haircut of $200. It cost an uproar. We saw McCain, I think, when he was campaigning as president. His wife is very rich, okay? He was wearing a Gucci shoe, and that was an uproar. Why so? Because when you're a president and a leader, it's no longer about what you love doing. I don't trust these doctors. That's fine if you are a Dangote, a private person, or Sasambo, someone here in Abuja or in Lagos, you have the money. But once you're a president, you cannot say you don't trust your institutions, that you are responsible to upgrade and make world class. So the notion that a private citizen, Muhammad Buhari, goes to London 30 years ago, loves British doctors, loves British tea, British weather, the Buckingham Palace, talking to his friend, the primate, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Those are good. President Buhari has lost those privileges to put himself in a position where he casts aspersion or scorn on the medical situation. So the accountability is a political accountability.
And so some of his supporters have also said that if you look at what happened to the late Tanzanian President John Magufuli, it was his refusal to actually admit that there is COVID or want to go outside the country to seek treatment that eventually made him to end up in a casket. And they are saying that, look, they don't expect that. I mean, when it comes to health, it's a personal decision. Irrespective of where the president can get the best surgeons, he should have access to them.
The answer to that once you take that position, then accept the blowback of saying you failed. You can't have it both ways. You may be right that maybe if this guy stays here with our Shako, which he cost for 5 years Medicare, something could happen. You're right. But then when you are doing that, don't go back and say, guys, don't criticize me for doing this. No. Yes, we failed. That's number one. That's why we're here. Because for 5 years...
Which a lot of people have said that President Buhari has refused to admit that his government has actually failed.
No, the government has failed because for 5 years, you could at least upgrade the clinic at the villa, which is under your control. The doctor is your doctor. So that this routine could be done there. So the question then is, can you appropriate? Can you say that the previous people have been irresponsible for medical tourism? Why should they go to medical?
Which is the area that surprises a lot of us. But the president, while he became, while he was the president-elect, went to Chatham House and he actually willingly gave that speech and said that he doesn't see any reason. It doesn't make sense to him for president to keep going, which is the normal thing everybody would think about. But what in your own thinking would have led to this kind of philosophy that the president could jettison that kind of statement he made personally for the past 5 years and nothing has happened?
I think first impunity, and I think recklessness. I mean, this is not a one-off thing. The president, at least we can count 5 critical things President Buhari said he would do, he never did. He said he was going to declare his asset. It doesn't cost any medical. This is not a health hazard. It's a public declaration. We were asking him, Yar'Adua didn't promise anything, but Yar'Adua delivered. He was the first person, perhaps the only president, who has publicly declared his asset. President Buhari, who said he was going to do that, never did. He said he was going to constitute the Public Procurement Council. 6 years, he never did. He said he was going to sell off the bogus presidential fleet. 6 years, he never did. So it's typical of the president, I would argue by now, that he walks back on all he said to become president.
And he has 2 years left.
And it's a question of integrity. So a president whose hallmark, whose selling point for election was his integrity, has been the president that has betrayed integrity the most. That's the point.
And do you think within the shortest time he has, he can still achieve some of these things?
He can't achieve because first, he's not even recognizing, and his handlers are not recognizing that there's a problem. The president will not change anything because it starts first with acknowledging the sensitivity of citizens and even use presidential communication, even if it's to deceive them, to say, oh yes, you guys are right, but look. This guy basically sit back. They don't give a hoot. And
now let's talk, Doctor, let's just quickly talk about these 2 groups being sponsored allegedly. The other group is saying you were sponsored. This group is also saying you were sponsored and all of that. How does that create a bad image for the country in the UK?
In fact, the fact that the president is holding in Nigeria House and the crowd is out there saying go home Buhari is damaging for the country from a diplomatic point of view. Whether you like president or not, it's not good for the country. And personally, I would say we shouldn't even go that far. But this is democracy. It's bad for Nigeria. It's bad that Nigeria cannot provide routine checkup for his doctor for the past 6 years. It's bad for the country that the president's wife himself accesses healthcare in Dubai, not in Nigeria. Everybody in this government probably accesses healthcare abroad. So that's already a damage for the country, and unfortunately we are stuck here, and I don't see any reprieve.
We just have to go on a short break now. You're still watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including we find out the state of Nigeria's diaspora voting. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. With the 2023 general election in view and the diaspora voting bill passing second reading in the House of Representatives, Nigerians in the diaspora may soon be able to participate in elections from wherever they are in the world. It has been years of struggle for Nigerians in the diaspora to be able to cast their ballots. Nigeria's Electoral Commission says it is ready to roll out diaspora voting and desirous to give Nigerians living abroad the right to vote. So what's the state of this bill in the National Assembly, and what moves are being put in place to make sure it becomes a reality before the next general election? Well, I still have with me here Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a Rise News analyst, and we'll take a look at all of these issues. Let's first of all begin with the merits of diaspora voting. How feasible is it for a population like us, where a lot of things are not properly documented, and you may have, a lot of people crying foul again that you're having people from different countries coming to Nigeria to come and vote, like we've been having with people saying that some people are following through porous borders to come into the country and they are undocumented. Absolutely.
I mean, the election cannot have problem, and if you're going to, whether it's digitalized voting or diaspora voting, we need to accept that there will be challenges. But then, what's the benefit? You see, the thing about diaspora voting is that, apart from the fact that, of course, Nigerians' inherent intrinsic value, Nigerians abroad have a right to elect their leaders, because they're not, some of them are not even permanent, immigrants. Some of them are temporarily out of the country, and they are Nigerian citizens. Okay, so that's one issue. It's an entitlement. We can't talk about democracy and disenfranchise that level, that amount of that category of persons. Again, instrumental value. You see, people have argued that the middle class diaspora, most of Nigerians abroad are usually, as is the case with all kinds of exit, usually people who are middle class, educated, and all that. And so they come with a value. They have also acquired democratic values and dispositions. So their engagement in politics in Nigeria, in the home country, helps to strengthen democratic accountability. So the argument here is just like with technical skills, brain gain. They go out, they come back, they help to grow the economy. So they're getting involved as voters, as those who are going to run for election, helps democracy, helps create a strong center for accountability.
And so some people are not averse to them actually voting. What they are averse to is for someone staying in London and contesting for an election in Nigeria here.
Well, but you have to, you have to, if you want to contest an election in Nigeria, you have to also as well comply with all the rules. So you are a registered voter, there's no independent candidacy, that means you belong to a political party in Nigeria, you are running in a constituency where you also meet the requirements. So basically, just like any other person in Nigeria, by the way, as the world gets globalized, many Nigerians work from New York, Washington, and London. Arise News is everywhere. So some stuff could be posted out to London. That doesn't make them less Nigerian. So I'm in support of anybody who wants to run an election in Nigerian diaspora should, once you comply with the constitutional and legal framework, then it's a question of getting involved. And then the constituents will ask, who are you? What have you done? Are you involved? So democracy shouldn't be a matter of, show you into the power. People have to ask questions. So if you're just in London doing your 7 to 24 hours job and then 7 to 24 hours job, and then suddenly you feel like you can be a candidate, they will trash you. You just get no votes. So the idea is, look, don't disqualify or don't exclude your population, but primarily mostly as voters. And again, the question around security, safety, and validity of those votes, it will now be a question of how do we do it? In the US, for example, the embassies here, people vote. People in military operations across the world vote. And
those are usually pre-election votes.
Pre-election voting. So we need to create a clear, transparent, and fraud-proof system that guarantees that these votes, of course, first we start with the database. How many Nigerians are in UK, in London? We have to have those data. How many are registered Nigerians in those areas? Because we just can't be Nigerian notionally. They have to be registered, Nigerian passports, and then the embassies have to have integrity process. So I think INEC has a lot of structural work to do, but we should get there.
Let's talk about this diaspora bill. One thing that makes me happy is that the House of Representatives is already showing the way, considering the challenges that have faced the House when the Deputy Speaker of the House made some comments against one of the petitions sent in by some diasporans and all of that. So it's more of like a redemption. But let's talk about the feasibility of this law actually of this bill becoming law before the 2023 general election. INEC has said it's willing to embark on diaspora voting and all of that. But do you foresee us having this law before the 2023 general election?
I think the pressure and the way both houses are seemingly keen about getting electoral system reformed, we are going to have... The
Senate President says that hopefully by the middle of June, the Electoral Act should be out.
I think they will pass an Electoral Act. Now the question is, what will be in that Electoral Act? I see this House, this National Assembly is someone would say not too independent, a little bit cautious, not as courageous. So the question, will they take some of those radical propositions? I worked on the bill on behalf of persons with disability, and there are several innovations that we try to put in. The question is, I don't know, with the leadership, because it's all about leadership at the two houses, most members will not be even focused on the issues. So the House committees, the Joint Committee, and the leadership of the two houses will determine to a large extent what version of Electoral Act to be passed. Is it the one that's radical enough that includes, for example, electronic voting, minimum electronic transmission of results, that also allows for diaspora vote, like we mentioned, that deals courageously with the issue of electoral financing, electoral offenses, whether creating a commission? These are the issues that are standing. And so the question will not be, surely they'll pass one bill before 2023, I'm sure of that. But what version? And with the president now, again, don't forget that this president has refused to sign one of those bills under the previous National Assembly.
Yes, that's so because it was close to the election, but now that's why the lawmakers are doing it before
the election.
Yeah.
But whether it's close to, Jonathan signed, as a matter of fact, the 2015.
I think it was in March, same month of the election.
He signed
because a lot of people didn't even know that
he signed it off. So the question is not only about close to election, it's also about, do you accept the terms? Don't forget that you also vetoed the PIGB bill extensively on disagreement over the content. So the question is, if there is going to be an agreement between the executive, if the National Assembly proactively, kind of find out what would the president sign and what would not sign, and then probably convince him that those similar radical propositions are good for him and good for the polity, I think they will sign.
There will be a win-win situation.
Yeah, but if he doesn't sign, I don't see them overriding.
Now, permit me to digress a bit. One of the areas I've always had challenges is why, for example, we journalists cannot be allowed to vote before the election day. Because on election day, we're busy, just like security men, even the INEC officials and all of that. I mean, we're all Nigerian citizens. Yeah. Tied to this diaspora voting is that kind of platform for people who will be on essential duty that day to be allowed to vote. Do you foresee that also happening?
I think it's not a big problem. The question is always about data, numbers. Who are these journalists? So people don't enter exceptions. Look at the issue around early vote in the US, because it could become a problem in terms of how votes. So INEC will be struggling with numbers and so on. So the question is, three questions. One is, can we even allow even these essential workers vote anywhere? So it's, for example, people, once they vote, their votes are tagged into whichever constituency they belong to. So as you are voting for, let's say, Abuja, but you are working, you are somewhere in the creek, monitoring election, you can actually vote. And the vote, if it's electronic, it gets there. That's number one. Number two is, of course, like, give them 2 days to do the voting. But then you must be able to have clarity as to who is entitled. Who are these? Because today, we even have unregulated media space in terms of social media, different platforms. People can get a tag of media and then they vote. So it's all about clarity, data, certainty, and of course
technology too.
And being able to do it in a way that at least we'll be able to say who voted and who didn't vote. So we have early voting, and then we can quantify the votes and put them in logbox, and then we know that it won't create confusion on the final day when the results are in and somebody brings a smoking gun.
Very interesting, like it happened in the United States. Well, we must thank you, Dr. Sam Amadi, Arise News analyst, for really giving us an insight into this, because technology will actually play a very big role in how this new electoral bill will be operated when it becomes law ahead of 2023 general election. Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow. I'm Somna Sambo. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, goodbye and thank you for watching.